And you can even try around with some other experimentation stuff, like sliding the reverb all the way up to the top here before your amp sim, and then you get another different and quite interesting tone sometimes. So the question is, if you're using the wider app, which I'm using here on this particular guitar, should you remove the reverb? Well, a lot of this sort of stuff comes down to personal preference, in my opinion anyway, and that is whether you want to have the effects before or after or none at all. So when you've got your chain set up here, so here is this guitar. Let's just solo it. At the moment it sounds like this. And the reason I've added wider, if you're not familiar with the wider plugin, it's a free plugin here where you can actually make your track sound wider. It's a stereo widening plugin and it works well. If we turn it off, you'll hear that the guitar is pretty much like right up the guts, right down the middle. Adding wider does this. It's just a cool way, if you've only got one guitar, it's a cool way of getting some width. Now, ideally, you'd record that same guitar part a second time, pan them left and right, and then you get yourself that wall of guitar sound. But this is kind of a cheap workaround. So at the moment here, you'll notice that I do have a little bit of reverb on the Tone Bridge plugin. I'm using this Animal Tone Bridge plugin. If I was not using anything there at all, it would be not much, yeah? But there's two options that you have here. You can either put your reverb in your chain. So wider doesn't actually create reverb. It creates a bit of separation and it uses some slight delay between the left and the right channel to create a little bit of width. However, it doesn't actually really add any reverb. So the way I would approach this is you got two choices here. When you hit your edit button here, you can add in some track reverb, and you can either put it before or after. So with this reverb afterwards, I'll just make it like super wet, just so that you can sort of hear the difference here. This is with some reverb straight after the wider plugin. So you get a big kind of hall reverb kind of sound there. Or the other option is, I don't know if a lot of folks know this, but if you hit the edit button here, these little three dots on the side here, I can't remember what you call those, if you slide this up and put it above the wider plugin, then your reverb is actually applied before the stereo width. So if we hit done and play this now, so you get a slightly different kind of tone, and you can even try around with some other experimentation stuff, like sliding the reverb all the way up to the top here before your amp sim, and then you get another different and quite interesting tone sometimes. Now, I don't think that sounds particularly good. So personally, I tend to put my reverb at the end of my chain. I do any of the sort of colorization processing, and then reverb is at the end. Because if you think about it, that's the way it works in real life. So your reverb is based around like a hall reverb or like a church reverb or a room reverb. You're not going to hear the room sound before you apply your processing. That kind of doesn't make sense if you think it through in terms of how sound develops. So usually you want your reverb at the end. So that would be the answer to that one. I would not add your reverb first, put your wider on, because you may not even need it. It may sound just fine with just the wider plugin, because it does create a bit of space. But if you want to add a little bit of additional reverb, no harm, no foul if you wanted to do that by adding it after the fact.